Las Vegas, the entertainment capital of the world, renowned for its non-stop nightlife, countless casinos, and being home to the largest regional championships in Pokemon history. If there was ever a time to take a gamble with a deck that no one had played before, this has gotta be the tournament for it. Let me set the scene. Some things in life just go perfectly together. Cheese and wine, fish and chips, my mornings, and a ton of coffee. And in the Pokemon TCG, it's gotta be Marnie's Grimmsnarl and Frostlass. These two have been absolutely inseparable since the initial release of Grimmsnarl back in Destined Rivals. I mean, just look at everything the pair has accomplished together. With over $150,000 in total earnings, there is no doubt that it's a solid deck. But how does Grimmsnarl fare on its own? Well, I think the results speak for themselves and they are not particularly impressive. So, like pretty much everyone else, I completely wrote off the possibility of breaking up the couple. In fact, 2 weeks prior to Vegas at Brisbane Regionals, I submitted yet another classic list containing the duo, where I achieved an extremely mediocre top 64 finish. But it really did get me thinking. Is there something more here? While I love playing Grimmsnarl and Spikemouth Gym is undeniably broken, I felt like Frostlass was holding back the deck's true potential. Was it really possible that we don't actually need Freezing Shroud? My plan was to cut out this core Pokemon line and functionally run the deck with only half the capabilities of a standard Grimmsnarl build. This was going to require some Danklin branded cooking, and there's no better chance than a 17-hour flight from Australia to the US where I got plenty of time alone with my thoughts. The initial concept I came up with was inspired by Tord's Mega Absol deck's engine, which primarily utilized a combination of Yveltal's 0 retreat cost, Pecharunt's Subjugating Chains ability, which provides 1 free switch for dark types each turn, at the arguably beneficial cost of poisoning them, and Mega Kangaskhan's Run Errand ability to draw 2 cards whenever it's in the active. This allows you to promote Kangaskhan, draw some cards, then pivot out by promoting Yveltal with Pecharunt, before finally retreating into something else. Or alternatively, if you're using Yveltal to lock up an opponent's liability with its clutch attack, you can instead retreat into Kangaskhan, draw 2, and then go back into Yveltal with Pecharunt, which has the added bonus of poisoning Yveltal, eventually building up damage that Munkidori can send over with Adrenabrain. Like I said, this was already a proven concept in Mega Absol, but I wanted to apply it to a different dark deck with Grimmsnarl. While Mega Kangaskhan was initially enticing, a 3-prize liability like that just didn't realistically fit neatly into the deck. However, I had a different Pokemon in mind, one that actually functioned in a very similar fashion, generating card advantage whenever it's in the active. Tatsugiri, with its ability to attract customers, can fetch a supporter from the top 6 cards of the deck once per turn whenever it's in the active. Normally, I am this guy's #1 hater. 70 HP and an ability is absolutely awful when you're running Frostlass, but we've cut that half of the deck. Additionally, it was always a pain to move in and out of the active and properly utilize its effect. But now with Yveltal and Pecharunt, that is no longer an issue. Now with this rough draft of my mad concoction and finally having landed in Vegas, it was time to pass out. That trip was absolutely exhausting. And there'd be plenty of time on Thursday to lock in and properly start testing. Once I got some games in, the engine itself felt really powerful. I was getting a ton of value from the free switches and extra access to supporter cards every turn. Plus, I wasn't even missing Frostlass in the majority of meta matchups. Gardevoir, Dragapult, the Mirror all felt significantly better without that half of the deck. I won't dive into all the intricacies of every specific matchup here, since not everyone wants to sit through all that yapping. But if you are interested, I'll be posting some bonus content for my YouTube channel members, Patreon supporters, and over on my Metafy. What you do need to know for now is that in exchange for honestly a pretty rough time into some of the more rogue strategies, I was really boosting my odds into all of the most popular decks. Except for one single matchup that I simply could not overcome without access to Freezing Shroud. Gholdengo, the most popular deck in the current format and maybe my most hated card at the moment. There was no chance I'd be able to succeed without at least some answer to this sea of coin bonus enjoyers. And I just couldn't find anything that worked. At least with Frostlass, while the matchup wasn't great, I still had some opportunities to overwhelm them with damage counters. So, by the end of Thursday night, while I did decide to keep in the Tatsugiri and Pecharunt package, to my disappointment, Frostlass was back in the list. for now. There was still one last day to figure things out before the tournament. While a lot of Friday did end up being dedicated to seeing the venue, checking in, and filming a bit of fun content for the stream, I did have a few hours after all that to test some more, and that's when it happened. We're hanging out in one of the hotel rooms, grinding out games. The night is getting late, and I'm mid-crash out about how broken and unbeatable Goldengo is. Then Aiden Coos turns to me and says, it'd be so tough if you played Toadscruel and Grimmsnarl. 50 billion neurons immediately fire off in my brain and everything comes together. Grimmsnarl just found its new best friend. I only have time to vibe check like 3 or 4 games into Goldengo, but the concept seems to be working and I am both confident and desperate enough to lock it in. Plus, since it's only a 2-1 line compared to the 2-2 Frostlass, I've now got space to throw in a luxury Psyduck for a bit of a better time into Dusknoir decks. Here's the final 60 that I scrambled together while walking back to my hotel at 11 PM. The standout cards here are obviously the 2-1 Toadscruel to counter Goldengo, shutting down their superior energy retrievals with its Slime Mold Colony ability, severely limiting their damage potential. I also chose to go with only 3 Munkidori. While they are incredible, without Frostlass, I don't need the full count of 4. There's the Yveltal Tatsugiri Petrant package, which I already discussed before, and Psyduck gets a lot better as a counter to Dusknoir decks, since being a 70 HP Pokemon with ability is nowhere near as bad when you aren't factoring in Freezing Shroud. There's also 3 Night Stretcher and a Super Rod, which is on the high end of recovery, but is vital for continuously chaining Toadscruels against Goldengo, if they ever choose to target them down. And lastly, we've got Binding Mochi. It's a nice plus 40 modifier to fix Grimmsnarl's otherwise unimpressive 180 base damage. While 40 doesn't really solve much that 30 wouldn't, I still think it's a better choice than Defiance Band for being able to utilize it more aggressively while even or ahead on prizes. Plus, there is a really spicy combo it enables that I'm not going to spoil just yet. It's a bit of a secret weapon, but I promise it'll come up later in the video, and trust me, it is incredible. Anyway, with what is almost definitely my most experimental and undertested list yet submitted, it was time to try and get some sleep before a massive weekend of locking in for the biggest regional championships of all time. Now that it's Saturday morning, the tournament starts in a couple hours and my list is already submitted, you'd think my next major hurdle would be winning round 1. But you'd be wrong, because I still need to find a couple more cards for my deck. While I do have 2 Toadscruels, ever since Journey Together released, they aren't the most optimal ones anymore. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to these kind of things. There is one relatively realistic scenario where I'd really want to have that particular Toadscruel. Since it has weakness to grass, if I happen to open it against Dragapult, Badoo's Itchy Pollen will hit for 20 rather than 10, which is already a great thing when I'm playing Munkidori. But the reason this one is better than any of the other grass-weak Toadscruels is that Spray Fluid attack. 10 damage for a single colorless energy perfectly complements the 20 I can already move with Munkidori's Adrenabrain for an exact knockout on Badoo. Luckily, I'm able to swing past Aiden's hotel in the morning, grabbing a couple and completing my round 0 side quest. But I've got a little side quest for you. Trust me, it's easy and the reward is incredible. All you have to do is click the subscribe button. I promise, it'll give you some great videos and me some good luck in this tournament. We both know I'm gonna need it. This was actually my first US regionals. So once I stepped foot in the venue and saw everyone there, I properly started to realize the sheer scale of this tournament. It was so much closer to an international level event than any regionals I'd previously attended in Australia. Not only were there more than 2,900 players in just the Masters division of TCG, there were also some of the best players from every corner of the globe. Peak competitors from Japan, Latin America, Europe, and of course, Australia. This tournament was going to be enormous. So yeah, I'm sitting down at my table, waiting for round 1 to start, fans taking photos, and I am stressed. I'm pretty used to it though. Honestly, the first few matches always have me way more on edge than any of the later rounds, even leading into Top Cut. I'm sure it's at least in part due to me gradually becoming more comfortable in the environment and with whichever deck I'm playing for the weekend. However, I still think that the biggest culprit is the sheer uncertainty of not knowing what card my opponent could flip over. Once I've racked up 10 wins, I can be pretty confident that none of my opponents are going to be repping Mega Venusaur. Sorry fellas, it's just not that good. And while most people would be pretty chuffed about collecting a free win into a funny deck round 1, I am in fact terrified of getting steamrolled by one. See, I really enjoy playing anti-meta strategies. It doesn't mean a completely rogue strategy that makes no logical sense. For example, this current Grimmsnarl deck is specifically designed to capitalize on Gardevoir's Dark Weakness, abuse Dragapult with multiple Monkey Dories, and feast on Goldingos thanks to Toadscruel's Slime Mold Colony ability. Anything else outside that handful of top meta matchups could go completely unanswered by my teched out 60. With all that said, you can probably imagine my immense relief when my first round opponent flipped over Ralts, the #1 matchup that I was hoping to hit. Specifically, they were playing Jellicent Gardevoir, which I personally predicted to be the much more successful version of the deck, combining Gardevoir's absolutely absurd ability to enable strong attackers with Jellicent's power to lock you out of both items and tools. However, despite being, in my opinion, the best deck in the meta, both of these Pokemon are weak to Dark and have no chance of surviving Grimmsnarl's Shadow Bullet. The main things that can go wrong in this matchup are getting confused by Monkey Dory and wiped by TM Devolution, both of which Petron EX perfectly counters, providing you a way to switch out of confusion and acting as a potential attacker that won't be knocked out by TM Devolution. In Game 1, I'm tasked with navigating through some somewhat tricky prizing, missing both a Morgrim and a Grimmsnarl who are happily chilling out in the second half of my prize cards. This means that I'll be even more susceptible to TM Devo if I choose to rare candy plus set up a Morgrim. I managed to take a solid lead, and as I go down to 2 prize cards while they still have 4 remaining, I'm pretty sure that I'm safe. They appear to not have Drifloon for any massive KOs, and my Grimmsnarl is still at full HP. Taking those last couple prize cards should be a piece of cake. And then they pull a surprise Mega Gardevoir out of nowhere. This isn't a particularly conventional inclusion, but when it works, it really works. Mega Sinfonia easily swings for 350 damage, leaving me without any attackers. And I haven't even pre-attached a Petrunt yet, so I can't rely on Irritated Outburst to close the game. Luckily, I have a really strong board composition outside of that absent attacker. Tatsugiri, Yveltal, and Petron are all in play, the core engine of the deck. I promote Tatsugiri and it manages to find me a boss's orders. Then Petron allows me to promote Yveltal, who, unlike Tatsugiri, doesn't require energy to retreat. A Nest Ball for Blood Moon Earth Luna and a hand attach is enough to get the bear online, and that boss's orders brings up my opponent's Pheasantipity to close out a tight Game 1. In the second game, I have to go first, which isn't ideal. But I am able to follow up with pretty much the perfect turn 2, evolving both of my Morgrims with TM Evo. My opponent takes a bit of an aggressive line, KOing one of them with Roaring Scream. But that just opens up an even stronger play on my side. Rather than needing exactly boss's orders, I can instead use Arven to find Countercatcher. This facilitates a 3-prize turn where I can KO Gardevoir and Screamtail simultaneously thanks to that bonus 30 damage tacked onto Shadow Bullet. The concern here is that once again, I only have a single Grimmsnarl. But with only a single Curlier on their side, they won't be able to evolve both Gardevoir EX and Mega Gardevoir EX this turn. Instead, they attempt to buy some time by using Mind Bend and confusing my active Grimmsnarl. A Nest Ball for Petrunt to abuse those subjugating chains and a boss's orders onto Gardevoir is enough to completely lock up the game. A nice 2-0 start to the day in by far my most comfortable matchup. Now, do you remember how I just went through that whole spiel about hitting random decks that I didn't account for? Well, in round 2, I am completely jump scared by a Raging Bolt in 2025. Way too many people are held captive in a toxic relationship with this deck and just simply cannot let go. I really don't know what meta decks you're expecting to beat with this prehistoric pile, but I guess it does have a good time into Grimmsnarl without Frostlass. So this is not going to be easy. Traditionally with Frostlass, retreat locking and chipping down their Pokemon would be a viable strategy. And while this is still technically possible with Yveltal and Petrunt's self-inflicted poison damage, it is a lot slower and they can generally play around this. Combined with multiple retreat locking outs on their side in the form of Prime Catcher and either Iron Leaves or Professor Turo's Scenario, sometimes even both, it is not something that I want to rely on. But there is one alternative line that my deck can take which Frostlass Grimmsnarl isn't capable of. It is dependent on me drawing really hot or my opponent having a slightly suboptimal start, but it is exactly what I go for in Game 1. They whiff a turn 1 Fan Rotom and just Teal Dance Attach Pass in preparation for a turn 2 attack. I've got Arven for Secret Box, which would be perfect if I had an energy to make use of TM Evo. So without that energy, I instead choose to just grab Buddy Buddy Poffin and hold on to Arven and Spikemuth Gym for the following turn. After another Teal Dance, he sets up a Hoot Hoot and preemptively benches Pheasantipity before taking a KO on my active Monkey Dory. Now I can start to cook. I'm able to Arven for Rare Candy and Binding Mochi, Spikemuth for Grimmsnarl, and then Nest Ball for Petrunt. This lets my poisoned Grimmsnarl smack Ogerpon for 220 damage, immediately taking the prize lead. Ideally at this point, I'd also preemptively bench Ursaluna and attach an energy in preparation for an attack once they go down to 3 prizes, but that's a bit of a luxury, and instead I just evolve my second Impidimp into Morgrim. He rips Fez for 3 and somehow turns that unassuming board into a full setup, but is just a single energy short of Bellowing Thunder taking the KO on my active Grimmy. If he did get there, honestly, I probably would have been in an even better position, since I could have re-established Grimmsnarl and counter-catched up Fezandipity, knocking it out thanks to the 30 damage already on it from the previous Shadow Bullet. Instead, I just have to punch another 220 straight into Raging Bolt. But this neatly sets up a 4-prize turn for my second Grimmsnarl if nothing gets removed from the board. They do take the KO this time, but like I said, all I need is that second Grimmsnarl and a counter catcher. I'm able to take my last 4 prizes all at once, hitting 180 into Fezandipity and 30 into Raging Bolt, closing out game 1. In game 2, they steal second from me. Most Raging Bolts I've played against generally opt for first out of comfort and reliance on Fan Rotom, but I do actually think going second is optimal in this particular matchup. And I really do wish that I was going second this game, because I opened Iron Bundle in the active with no other ball search. Absolutely terrified of getting donked, I bench Blood Moon Ursaluna and preemptively attach to it, given all that excess energy sitting in my hand. He misses the turn 1 attack, and I go for a classic Arven into TM Evo for a couple of Morgrims. I'm pretty sure that my opponent could have taken the first prize here, but instead they choose to play around my line from the previous game, leaving a single prizer in the active and depriving me of counter catcher. Ideally on their side, holding out for some gust in a 2-2-2 line, starting with my Blood Moon Ursaluna. Not gonna lie, I kinda sack them here, top decking a raw secret box. This opens up Boss's Orders on Teal Mask Ogerpon, Nest Ball for Petulant, Spike Myth Gym to evolve up my Grimmsnarl, and Binding Mochi for that all-important plus 40 damage. After I take these first 2 prizes and attach a second energy to Blood Moon Ursaluna, the game is functionally over. Regardless of where they attack, I should be able to take another 2 and then find my final 2 prizes by recycling Blood Moon Ursaluna. Even in the absolute worst case scenario where they use Baby Raging Bolt to snipe around my Blood Moon Ursaluna, I can still use Petulant to reset the bear and attack on back-to-back turns. This deck is absolutely fire. Up next is a Gholdengo. It's time to put the Toedscruel package to the test. Even with Frostlass, I genuinely think the matchup is pretty abysmal if you don't immediately get 2 of them online, which almost never happens, and even then it is still super losable. Now, the idea here is that I can set up Toedscruel and force them to choose between taking a 2-prize KO on my active, which could easily result in them completely running out of energy, or instead going out of their way to KO a single prizer multiple times, which muddies their prize map and often enables me to take the lead. In game 1, I have to go first, and I'm a little slow to get the Toad online. So even though I establish an advantageous position, I can't piece together a complete checkmate. After locking them out of most of their energy, I get a few good swings in with Grimmsnarl, and I'm just 1 attack away from winning the game. With Toedscruel online for me, it comes down to an Iono to 1 on their side, while they have only a single energy and a Super Rod left in their deck as ways to attack with Gholdengo. Coin bonus for 2, free retreat, coin bonus for another 2. They rip Super Rod, Earthen Vessel, Raw Energy, and Boss's Orders to steal the final prize on my bench, Toedscruel. Incredibly unfortunate. Even given my relatively slow setup, I still feel like I was a massive favorite in that game right up until the final top deck. In game 2, I get to go second, and I instantly set up a quick lock and continue to re-establish Toedscruel every time they target it down. Now, I'm not sure if they just didn't recognize that they were locked out of the game, or simply acknowledge that less time in game 3 is better for them, since the games where they win are a lot shorter than the games where I win. But regardless, game 2 dragged on with a long final turn despite me having checkmate on board. Going into game 3, I really wanted to resolve. Having a single tie is fine, it won't ruin my chances at day 2 or even top cut, but I'd just rather not take one so early, so I offer a gentleman's agreement. If the board state is blatantly obvious or either of us have game in hand, following the additional turn after 50 minutes is up, we'll decide a winner. I managed to somehow go a 3rd consecutive game without prizing one of the Toedscruel puzzle pieces, so the lock is all but inevitable. My opponent is even completely out of energy before time is called, and it gets to the point where I'm just instantly announcing attack whenever I get a chance, but I'm just barely not able to close it out in time. Even if they could manage 1 more KO on Toedscruel, I was sitting on Super Rod and TM Evo in hand the entire game. With their Artisan stuck in play, that means I can immediately spawn back in Toedscruel out of nowhere. However, apparently that wasn't enough proof, and we end up tying. Obviously, going off something more objective like prize cards would have been ideal, and in almost any other instance, that's exactly what I would have done. But it just isn't realistic for how this matchup plays out and would have been a completely one-sided deal. This situation feels even worse because I was 100% prepared to scoop. If I prized Toadscrawl, they took enough knockouts without losing access to all of their energies, I was going to give them the win. I'm fine with people not wanting to gentlemen's this early in the tournament. It's completely understandable. But if you don't want to, just clearly say when your opponent asks. It's a lot better than the other one-sided alternative. Whatever, I've just got to shake it off and play the next round. Unfortunately, I'm up against probably the most popular matchup that I don't stand a chance at beating. Terrorbox. It's only 3% of the room, so the odds I dodge them all were actually pretty reasonable. Similar to Raging Bolt, retreat locking is possible given they normally only have 2 outs. But again, I don't generate damage as fast as the Process variant, so it's not as reliable. I also can't realistically 2-2-2 prize race them, because without Shaman, Wellspring Ogerpon's Torrential Pump allows them to easily take the first 2 on my initial 1 prize board state. If I do go for a line that relies on racing, I'll need them to whiff in the late game off of an Iono. Also, fun side note, usually after the tournament, I'll go back and check each of my opponent's 60s on Limitless Labs. It helps me add context to why they may have made certain plays, or remind me of random details from a specific match that I didn't note down in the moment. It just helps take a little bit of pain away from the whole scripting process. However, when I went to go do it for this round, my opponent didn't have a deck list available, which I'm pretty sure means they were disqualified. They seemed chill enough, so I'm guessing that it was just for a serious deck list error or something. Hopefully nothing malicious. Anyway, they win the coin flip, and as you might expect, immediately set up a couple Hoot Hoots, Wellspring Ogerpon, and get the hand attach onto it. I TM Evo for double Morgrim and bench Yveltal. Honestly, I don't expect the Morgrims to stick, and this is more just to pressure them into double Knockdown. He does end up committing them both in order to pull off the boss Wellspring play and KOs both my Morgrims. This isn't ideal, but it does allow me to immediately start clutch locking and gives me multiple vulnerable targets. After a few turns of racking up damage on one of the knockdowns, he rips Professor Turo's Scenario to free it from the active. But thanks to Yveltal's 110 HP, they aren't able to take more than a single prize with Torrential Pump. Instead, just knocking out my active Yveltal and going down to 3. He does make one key mistake here though. After Turo, he re-benches the Hoot Hoot, going up to 8 Pokemon and bench locking himself out of ever playing Iron Leaves. I instantly re-establish the lock, but there is a single massive issue over on my side. Petrunt EX is hanging out in the prize cards. So I've got no way to rack up damage on my own board and abuse Monkey Dory's Adrenabrain. This means that it'll be impossible for me to piece together a full 6 prize board wipe. After like 10 turns of locking and setting up damage, I eventually have to let him play the game. They've got a heavily damaged Knockdown with 20 HP remaining and a Latias with 10 HP remaining. There's also a Mew that I can gust up for an even larger prize advantage. If I were to take 3 prizes on this board by gusting up Mew and sniping the Knockdown, they'll immediately respond to my Grimmsnarl, and then I'll almost definitely have to find another gusting card and a second Grimmsnarl on the next turn, without already having either of the pieces in hand. Alternatively, if I just take 4 on the Mew and Latias right now, I'll easily win with Ursaluna next turn, which I do have ready in hand. However, this opens me up to the possibility of losing against Briar, a card which only 14% of Terrorbox players are running, a risk I'm willing to take. I take the 4 prize turn, they evolve that Hoot Hoot into Noctowl, and then search out Briar. Unfortunately, not all risks pay off, and they did have the 3 prize turn. It was already a really bad matchup, and I only had a chance because they threw by bench locking themselves, so I can't be too upset about it. Game 2 is much less interesting. I don't find any chances to set up retreat lock in time, getting completely run over in the early game and then fighting for my life to stay alive in the late game. I take my first 2 prizes with Blood Moon Ursaluna while they only have 1 remaining, and my board is literally just Blood Moon Ursaluna, Petron, and an Impidimp. My opponent powers up a Terapagos that can deal 240 damage if they have a full bench. This isn't enough damage to knock out the bear, but it will deal with Petulant. Then they Buddy Buddy Poffin for an Iron Bundle to bring up one of my benched Pokemon. Wait, they play Buddy Buddy Poffin for what? I kindly explained that you cannot do that as Brian Bundle has more than 70 HP, to which my opponent responds, "Oh, don't worry, I had boss in hand anyway." That is so awesome. Going into round 5, you can probably imagine that I'm not feeling too great about the run. There were definitely a few fan photos right to force a smile. And I'm sure you can guess what happened to my sanity when my next opponent flipped over Raging Bolt. I went into this tournament expecting mountains of Gardevoir, Dragapult, and Goldingo, which is exactly what the meta graphic reflected. So why have I paired 3 Noctowl decks in my first 5 rounds? Come on guys, it's almost 2026. Are we really still playing with these cards? It's fine though. I won the coin flip and my start is kinda cracked. I should be able to answer their first knockout with a 2-prize KO from Shadow Bullet. However, my Petron is once again stuck in the prize card, so I can't make use of Binding Mochi. This exact potential problem was the primary argument for playing Defiance Band. But trust me, Binding Mochi will have its time. After they take that first prize, I just have to settle for KOing their only Hoot Hoot, hoping that they whiff on one of the next 3 turns. I am also able to preemptively attach an energy onto Ursaluna, meaning that if my Grimmsnarl is KO'd, I'll have an immediate response with the bear. Even without Noctowl, getting through Grimmsnarl using Teal Mask Ogerpon is easy work for my opponent. Luckily, I'm able to respond with an Iona to 3 and a KO on Teal Mask Ogerpon with my 2 Energy Blood Moon Ursaluna, which they have no issue one-shotting with Raging Bolt after ripping a Professor Sada's Vitality off the top. That's alright though, their energy is spread kinda thin. I might just be able to brick them off of an Iona to 1 with a second bear knockout. Plus, with Petrant finally out of the prizes, I'll be able to use Ursaluna on back-to-back turns if it survives. Although, they were able to preemptively bench Pheasantipity, so my odds aren't incredible, and once again, they get there without using Noctowl's Jewel Seeker. I definitely wasn't the favorite in that game after whiffing the 2-prize turn, but I was kinda just hoping to catch a lucky break at some point towards the end. I've been absolutely copping the bad end of variance when it comes to matchups, and I just want to start hitting some more meta decks. So game 2 was probably the best thing that could have happened to me in this spot. Let's just take a look at the photo. Yeah, I used Filch for 4 turns and saw absolutely 0 relevant cards. How incredible. But like I said, this was probably the best thing that could have happened. Was I really going to take back-to-back games off of a Raging Bolt while playing on tilt? Probably not, and if I made a major mistake, I doubt that I could stop beating myself up over it throughout the rest of the day. So a nice quick game entirely out of my control is exactly what I needed. At least now I have a full hour to chill out, mentally reset, and lock in because I'm on my final tournament life. From here, a loss or a tie at any point would eliminate me from day 2 contention. And even if I do make it to the second day, anything that isn't a win will eliminate me from top cut contention. Also, a full hour may sound like a bit of an exaggeration when the rounds themselves should only be 50 minutes plus 1 extra turn. But at this tournament, we were consistently going 40 minutes into overtime. See, for the first time ever, they were trialing online match reporting in day 1. And look, maybe doing it at the largest regionals of all time wasn't the best idea. But despite it not exactly working out and eventually giving up and going back to paper match slips later in the day, I think with a bit of refinement, this could be a really good idea, and I hope to see it eventually become the norm. In hindsight, I'm glad we had these massive delays though, because it gave me that break that I so desperately needed. With my head now clear, bottle of Gatorade empty, and 3 protein bars in my stomach, it was time to properly lock in. No misplays, no losses, just dubs from here on out. I'm feeling a lot more chilled out now, and low-key, most of the other people at bottom tables are as well. My round 6 opponent is wearing some Wet Leg merch, so we just chat about the new album while waiting to start. It's a nice change of pace. In a record of 2-2-1, we'd have to win back-to-back-to-back-to-back-to-back-to-back-to-back rounds to make top cut. And I mean, that's not gonna happen, right? They're on Dragapult Dusknoir, and I gotta be honest, hitting a real deck is a nice breath of fresh air. Normally, I don't like to rely on Frostlass for this matchup anyway, so I was more than happy to trade it out for Psyduck. In game 1, they go aggressive, trying to remove my duck from the board, but in doing so, they stunt their own setup, constantly using boss's orders rather than draw supporters and disruption, and although I'm feeding them free 70 HP prizes, that just gives me easy access to counter catcher, and I'm eventually able to close it out. In game 2, they opt to go first, which is definitely wrong. I'm not going to complain about it though, but despite my strong Arven start, I do have both TM Evos prized. However, there's an alternative attack I can use on turn 1. They opened Monkey Dory, and after I realized that I can't grab Evo off my Arven, I instead grab Air Balloon and go into a Yveltal lock. This prevents them from using Itchy Pollen and gives me access to my items for a couple more turns, buying me more than enough time to candy out a Grimmsnarl and set up multiple Monkey Dory. So despite an initial prizing road bump, I'm able to turn this one into an easy win. With that momentum of finally getting back on the board after what was honestly a pretty miserable 3-round streak, I'm feeling good again. We are so back. It's not exactly where I want to be, but if I can just win the next 2 rounds, I'll have made made it through phase 1 of the tournament. And I am pretty chuffed to see my opponent flip over their own Impodim. I genuinely cannot remember the last time I lost a Grimmsnarl mirror match. I actually might have never lost a Grimmsnarl mirror match, and I don't really want to start now. If you've heard me talk about this mirror before, you probably know that I really don't think you should be burning rare candy if you don't have to. I'm going to guess that my opponent hasn't religiously watched all of my Grimmsnarl videos, because that is exactly what they do. Rare candying to evolve into Grimmsnarl while only having Morgrim on the bench. I don't have an Arven to immediately punish this with TM Devo, but since they went aggressive and gave me access to Counter Catcher, I just gust up and KO the Morgrim. I was also able to draw into an Arven for the following turn, where I simply devolve the Grimmsnarl back into Impodim and aren't able to re-establish another attacker until I've pretty much just locked up the game. My opponent learns from this mistake and doesn't repeat it in game 2, but I'm still able to develop a commanding position, using my mirror tech of Iron Bundle to consistently make progress on board states where it'd otherwise be disadvantageous to attack. However, after clearing out his Monkey Dories, I get a bit overconfident thinking that I can extend to a full checkmate position. But I'll be honest, I wasn't actively respecting Energy Switch, and it gave them a line back into the game. Although they only found the Energy Switch by using Arven, eating up their supporter for turn and keeping my boss's orders safe in hand to win the match on the following turn. 4 clean games in a row, and now I'm just one set away from making it into phase 2. It feels really weird playing a win-in at only round 8 of such a massive tournament. And because of this shorter phase 1, we actually end up with over 512 players in the second half of the tournament. Absolutely insane. My opponent flips over Ralts, which I am very happy to see, but they seem completely unfazed by my Impodim. Shouldn't they be sweating over this scary dark type? Well, they actually let me know that they've hit 2 Grimmsnarls in the last few rounds, going 3-1 in games. I think the matchup is actually pretty solid for them. Then I realize why. They are not playing the classic Gardevoir Jellicent that I predicted to dominate this tournament. Instead, it's a much more aggressive build with Drifloon and 3 Bravery Charms. Having an easy way to one-shot my Grimmsnarl is definitely concerning, but I wouldn't say it's quite favored for Gardevoir, especially against my particular 60. Game 1 is pretty back and forth. There was a key turn where they had just attacked with a heavily damaged Screamtail, but I had Secret Box for boss's orders and could respond with a KO on their only Gardevoir. However, Pheasantipity was also in play, and with those extra 3 cards from Flip the Script, the benched Curlier would almost definitely evolve into a replacement Gardevoir. So instead, I actually choose to grab Binding Mochi for my tool and boss the Fez, KOing it thanks to my buffed Grimmsnarl, keeping their hand size low. This also has the added benefit of increasing Iron Bundle's value, since now nothing on the bench can survive a hit, whereas previously a Bravery Charmed Pheasantipity could have caused some serious issues. That lack of additional draw limits the power of their response, and I'm able to utilize their Artisan for Iron Bundle and close out the game. Then I am forced to open with Toedscool and the active. That's not great most of the time, because somehow I've also got Toedscool in hand, and this is a matchup where I actually proactively want to bench Pecharunt, so that 2 retreat cost won't be causing any issues. Thanks to Spikemouth Gym and a Nest Ball, I'm able to bench a couple Impidimps on turn 1, and my opponent just uses Mew EX as their active Pokemon to evolve a couple of Curliers. Without any fear of my opponent playing TM Devo thanks to the absence of Jellicent, I'm able to use Spikemouth for Grimmsnarl and then rip Arven for Rare Candy and Air Balloon, leading to a disgusting turn 2 Shadow Bullet that sends their Mew to the Lost Zone. They evolve into Gardevoir and Roaring Scream my benched Impidimp in an attempt to run me out of attackers, but I just send Screamtail to the Shadow Realm where Night Stretchers cannot save it. I am at risk of getting punished by a fully loaded Bravery Charm Drifloon plus a Monkey Dory, but they just haven't had that fast of a start and aren't able to piece it all together. So I win the set, solidifying my place in the second half of the tournament. I was actually so locked in during that match that I didn't realize how many people were watching. There was a whole group of incredible fans invested in whether or not my tournament run was going to continue. And I got to sign a whole bunch of Blood Moon Ursalunas afterwards, which is always a ton of fun. Great to meet you fellas. As much as I'd love a break now that I made it through this major milestone, despite it technically being phase 2 of the tournament, there was still one more round to play out today. It's a bit confusing, but overall it helps with the scheduling and ensures that we won't have to play finals at 11 PM tomorrow. So I gotta earn one more win before I can grab a bite to eat and get some sleep. I'm up against yet another comfortable matchup. Golden Go. It's been great hitting this streak of not seeing any more Noctowl decks. In game 1, they don't fully respect just how crippling Toadscruel can be, taking an early KO on my Grimmsnarl but functionally losing access to 7 of their energy for the rest of the game. I keep close track of how much damage they can piece together, factoring in the worst case scenario of them hitting Super Rod and immediately searching out all 3. This allows me to construct a completely unbreakable board and hold the resources to immediately bring back Toadscruel if required. They're left with 0 ways to take the final prize, and I'm able to win the first game. After this, they play much more conservatively with their energy, taking a different route and focusing on using their gusting to KO Toads whenever possible. They start by KOing one of my 2 Toadschools, which I immediately bring back, evolving the other one up into Toadscruel. Then they KO my Toadscruel, which I immediately bring back. At this point, if they go after my active Grimmsnarl, they'll be completely out of attacking options to finish the game. So they instead have to target my Toadscruel with boss's orders for a 3rd time. However, this absolutely cooks their prize map, leaving them with 3 more to take while I can win with just 2 of my own attacks given their lack of hand disruption, and the fact that my active Grimmsnarl has gone completely unchecked for the entire game. This ability to map out multiple turns in advance is rewarded even more than usual when you're playing against these decks that don't have Iono or any other way to manipulate your hand. 6 wins, 2 losses, and a tie is nowhere near my idea of a perfect day 1, but it could have gone a lot worse. So I am still thankful to be in top cut contention, only needing to win 5 more rounds tomorrow. Considering that we're all in Vegas, you can probably imagine that a lot of people went out for a big night, and I'll be honest, I was getting some serious FOMO. But as much as I would have enjoyed the vibes, I knew that I should probably get some sleep if I wanted to lock in for day 2. Besides, if I end up winning the tournament, that'll be an extra $10,000 I can go out and gamble with on Sunday night. I am greatly rewarded for this decision because on Sunday morning, would you believe it, I woke up and didn't feel completely terrible. Crazy, I know. And you know what made me feel even better? Seeing a Ralts across the table from me at the start of round 10. Unfortunately, I'm forced to open with a Psyduck. With only 70 HP and no way to get it off the board, this is arguably the worst Pokemon to have in play for this kind of matchup. To add on to the dumpster fire that is my board state, I need to bench Tatsugiri if I want to have any hope of getting into this game. And that means completely foregoing any turn 1 Impidimp. Luckily, Tatsugiri does attract some customers and I'm able to slowly work my way into the game. But I soon find out that similar to my last Gardevoir opponent, they aren't playing the Jellicent version either, instead opting for Drifloon and Mega Gardevoir EX to have multiple ways of one-shotting my Grimmsnarl. So even when I do eventually get an attacker online, it's too little too late and I'm shut out of game 1. Losing the first one always sucks, but it's particularly dangerous in this situation since if I'm not able to win back-to-back games in the remaining time, I'll essentially be eliminated from the tournament. I can't take a tie, I absolutely can't take a loss, I need to win. So choosing second going into game 2, there was no better time to bring out my spicy secret strategy that I've been wanting to use for the entire tournament. They open Screamtail and play Artisan to bench a Ralts. Just one Ralts. I've got Arven in hand, and while I am going to grab Secret Box, it's not going to be used to find TM Evo and set up a strong board for myself. Instead, I'm going to completely destroy my opponent's board. Off of the Secret Box, I find Spikemuth Gym, Nest Ball, Binding Mochi, and Boss's orders for the next turn. I Nest Ball for Petron and bench the Yveltal that I had in hand, attaching Binding Mochi and poisoning it into the active. Then I use my opponent's Artisan to bench Iron Bundle and make use of Hyper Blower, bringing Ralts into the active. I think you can see where this is going. Thanks to Binding Mochi and Ralts' Dark Weakness, Yveltal's Clutch is now dealing 120 damage. That's the source I wanted Binding Mochi for. A surprise way to take KOs on key Dark Weak Pokemon such as Ralts, Gimmighoul, and Munkidori on turn 1 off of just a single Arven and a Dark Energy. All I wanted was for it to pay off just one time in this tournament. And it really came in clutch here. Get it? Clutch? Yveltal's attack. On top of all this, I bump their Artisan with Spikemuth to deny easy access to another Ralts, and also allow me to start establishing Grimmsnarl on the side. I'm not sure if they forgot about that boss I preemptively grabbed off of Secret Box, but their follow-up play is to just establish another Ralts and TM Evo into Curlier, which I obviously knock out on site with boss's orders and another massively boosted Clutch. Unsurprisingly, they immediately scoop and we go into game 3. With only 10 minutes left on the clock, this one is going to be tight. But after that incredible showing, I've got got so much faith in my deck. Completely fearless of my donking potential and maybe hoping for a miracle turn 2 rare candy Gardevoir, my opponent chooses to go first in this third and final game. They open Drifloon and then without playing any other cards, they pass. I look down at my hand. There's an Arven and there's an Energy. All I need is for the whole combo to be in the deck. I slam down the Arven and start checking for all the pieces. Secret Box, Binding Mochi, Nest Ball, Petulant, but there's no Yveltal. It's stuck in the prizes. Luckily, that only matters when I'm trying to donk a Monkey Dory. Instead, I grab Spikemuth Gym and bench an Impidimp, attaching Binding Mochi and poisoning it with Subjugating Chains. This lets me rip a 100 damage Corkscrew Punch. Just take a look. What a beautiful board state. Genuinely, there is no better way that this day could have started than 2 back-to-back donks in a set where I was down a game and needed to win. You may think this is kind of a lucky break, and sure, in some ways it is. But you also need to remember that I chose to play these cards, and being able to knock out my opponent's Pokemon in turn 1 was a legitimate factor in that reasoning. In particular, why I chose to play Binding Mochi over the standard Defiance Band. On top of all that, my opponent did have Arven in hand, so if I wasn't able to pull off an instant turn 1 win, we were going to have a real game on our hands. With the good vibes of cooking someone with a ridiculous combo flowing through my veins, things just keep getting better as my next opponent flips over yet another Ralts. And this time, they're running the Jellyfish as well. Perfect. My meta prediction is really paying off. I mean, Gardevoir, Gholdengo, and Dragapult alone covers more than a half of the day 2 field. And that's even more concentrated at the top tables, which I am rapidly heading towards. Unfortunately, I do have to go first, and Air Balloon enables them to lock me out of items on turn 1 with Frillish. No matter what deck you're playing, this is always tough to deal with. Spikemuth Gym is my usual answer to this issue. But with one chilling out in the prizes and the other hiding somewhere in my deck, I just have to work with the tools I do have, which are an Impidimp that I benched on turn 1, a Petulant from my opening hand, and a Lily's Determination, which draws me into a second Monkey Dory, which is more than the 0 my opponent has. In fact, other than that turn 1 item lock, they really don't have heaps going on. So with no Grimmsnarl in sight, I choose to accelerate the damage getting stacked on my side of the board using Petulant to poison my own Morgrym. I start by moving the 20 damage from Oceanic Gloom over onto their Ralts, and then after a second Frillish attack and 2 ticks of poison, I use both of my monkeys to move all 40 damage onto Ralts, bringing it up to 60. Now even a Monkey Dory of their own won't be able to save it from my double Adrenabrain. After one more turn of us each sitting on relatively dead hands, I'm able to finish off Ralts, taking the first prize of the game without announcing an attack. And would you believe it, there's the Spikemuth Gym I've been looking for. Even under item lock, that's an out to Grimmsnarl, and now my board is so much more developed than theirs that it's an easy dub from here. In game 2, I am absolutely cooking. We're pretty much at the point where unless they hit exactly rare candy Gardevoir off of this Muse restart, the game is over. And maybe that led to a bit of overconfidence. Because in hindsight, I'm not sure exactly where, but with a bit more thought, I probably could have turned this into a 100% lock, which is one of the key skills that separates top players from the very, very best. Anyway, I'm sure you can guess that after Mew finished restarting, there was in fact a Gardevoir on their bench. It's fine though, I just need to see a Dark Energy in the next couple turns. Easy. Wait, I whiffed, and now I have to play a game 3 with only 10 minutes left on the clock? My opponent has a much better start and pulls off an aggressive turn 2 rare candy Gardevoir, foregoing any item lock and just removing my only Morgrym with Screamtail. But that early prize advantage might just be their downfall because I've got a Counter Catcher and Arven in hand, which means that I can search out Secret Box for rare candy and Spikemuth, evolving up a Grimmsnarl and gusting Gardevoir to KO it with Shadow Bullet, all while loading up a boss's orders in hand for the following turn. My opponent completely whiffs on hand disruption and doesn't find a TM Devolution either. They have to choose between either doing nothing or setting up a second Gardevoir, which I can immediately answer. It's a lose-lose situation for them, and I'm always winning. Remember how I said that I need to win back-to-back-to-back-to-back-to-back-to-back-to-back rounds to make top cut? Well, since then, I've won 6 of those 9 rounds, and the dream is actually starting to feel real. But honestly, that last set was way closer than it should have been, and I need to clean up my play. Like, obviously, I did play well enough, but it wasn't perfect, and I am worried that these small mistakes are going to catch up to me. In round 12, the glorious stream of Gardevoirs finally stopped. But fortunately, I am still playing against another comfortable matchup, Dragapult Dusknoir. In game 1, they need to bench Latias in order to get that initial Badoo item lock going. However, they are able to find an early Professor Turo scenario to get the liability out of play before I can punish it. This is both good and bad. On one hand, I would have loved to either trap or take 2 free prizes on that Latias at some point, point. On the other, now I know that they're down their Turo, I can more confidently play towards Yveltal lines in order to catch up and potentially build towards a TM Devo play, since I've already stacked a fair bit of damage on their only Dragapult. I take advantage of this by trapping their Monkey Dory for a turn in order to buy some time and further develop my own board. They attach a second energy onto Monkey Dory and use Mind Bend. Perfect, more damage to play with. Ideally, I would just hit TM Devolution here, wiping their only attacker and sending the Dracloaks back into Dreepies. But I'm not able to search it out just yet. I'm also not able to find Petron in order to remove the confusion. At this point, I could have just retreated into Grimmsnarl and taken the KO. But I was scared of giving them access to Countercatcher and KOing one of my Monkey Dories in response. So instead, I risk the confusion flip with Yveltal and try to trap Monkey Dory for another turn. I'd easily win if the lock sticks for one more turn. And if it doesn't, they'll need to hit boss's orders to make proper progress and really won't be able to do much else. What I didn't notice, however, was that there was already 2 damage counters on one of my Monkey Dories, which I easily could have just moved rather than healing Yveltal, completely avoiding the potential of Adrenabrain plus Phantom Dive to knock out my benched monkey. So when I flipped tails and they started Adrenabrating damage onto my Monkey Dory, I immediately recognized my mistake. But either they can't find Dragapult or get greedy for some extra draw and leave their Dracloaks in play unevolved. This game is still so winnable. Without jamming Tower in play, all I need is to just see TM Devo in the next couple of turns, which I don't. Again, this game was like 95% in my favor at one point, but I left that 5% open and was punished for it. Completely my fault. Sure, I could have drawn better, but I can't be mad at anyone other than myself. In game 2, I opened Psyduck, which is actually so fine since this is one of the only matchups where I actually want to see this guy. Then I attached energy and ripped Lily's Determination for 8 cards, filled with hopeful dreams of seeing some other basic Pokemon, a follow-up supporter for next turn, and if I'm lucky, a TM Evo to cheat out some Morgrims. Well, I do find 2 Impidimps, but absolutely nothing else, and no way to see more cards anytime soon. All I can do is pass turn after turn while my opponent fully sets up and keeps me locked out of the game with Badoo. But I do manage to sneak in a cheeky boss's orders onto Dreepy one of the turns, which forces them to bench Latias in order to keep up the lock. Eventually, he does pull the trigger and goes in with Phantom Dive, finally freeing me from the itchy Pollen prison. Now I suddenly have access to Nest Ball for Yveltal and Countercatcher to lock Latias in the active. After buying myself a few turns and establishing Grimmsnarl with the help of a rare candy, I decide to play it safe and not get too greedy. At any point, one of those recon directives could find Professor Turo's scenario, freeing Latias from the active and completely setting me back. So instead, I cash in my free 2 prizes now and make sure to leave that pesky Badoo alive for the late game. After building up the second Grimmsnarl, I'm able to close things out with a couple of swings into Dragapult, some Monkey Dory damage, and a cheeky Shadow Bullet for 30 onto Badoo. Unfortunately, that final turn of magic coincided with the final turn of time, meaning that we aren't even able to begin setting up for game 3. Despite us both wanting one of us to walk away with the win in order to remain in top cut contention, there was really no fair way to possibly decide, so we each reluctantly circle tie on the match slip. The one upside here is that we're each still eligible to make some cash if we win both of our final rounds. It was just a combination of unfortunate timing and a really long game too that I probably shouldn't have been able to steal from them. But my opponent was a genuine pleasure to play against, and we actually each had a moment where we let the other take back or change a decision. In game 1, he wanted to rearrange some Phantom Dive damage right as I was drawing for turn. And later that same game, he let me take back a Super Rod when I realized my odds would have been better if I just didn't shuffle the deck. I really appreciate that chilled out approach, even at top tables in the final few rounds of a regionals. I always view it as a case of treat others how you want to be treated. Despite my sights now shifting down from a top 16 cut to a top 32 cash, I'm still going to try my best to win these last 2. For the penultimate round, I paired into a Charizard. I've got a decent chunk of experience playing this matchup with Frostlass in my deck, although I'll be completely honest, I barely put any thought into how to approach it with this variant. But I've always considered one of my biggest strengths in Pokemon to be figuring things out on the fly. I've still always got the option for TM Devo as an available line, especially since a lot of Charizards were cutting back on Mist Energy. I checked afterwards and this particular opponent wasn't playing it. Plus with Psyduck in play, if they go for the Jet Energy Klefki, they'll be down to a single switching card and I can go into a more Yveltal focused mode. Alternatively, if they let my Duck stick and don't pop Duskmiles, I'll just refuse to take prizes and essentially be playing a better version of their deck, but with Monkey Dory as added support. I set up well and make my first attack by gusting up and punching into Pidgeot without having taken any prizes. They respond by hitting 180 into Grimmsnarl, and since I have Duck in play, I feel safe to establish my second Monkidori, heal 60 damage, Iono them down to 5, and then simply hit into the active Charizard. This way, I'll have 280 HP remaining and should tank a second Charizard hit. But the Iono sets them up with 2 of Klefki, Dusclops, and Jet Energy, with Pidgeot finding the missing piece. It wasn't the most insane draw, but it hurts my game plan and undoes that double monkey healing, allowing them to finish off my Grimmsnarl. I switch over to plan B, using TM Devo to simultaneously remove Pidgeot and Charizard, hoping that they won't find a rare candy. But before using the attack, I gust up their Energyless Klefki to deny any potential Pheasantipity draw, as well as to further pressure their energy since they're already down a Jet and 4 Fire. The plan works and they don't have a way to immediately re-establish, not even hitting the Charmeleon evolution. Let me set the scene, because this part is completely burned into my mind. There's a Klefki without energy in the active. They've just benched Shaman. There's a Pidgey with 20 or 30 HP remaining, and one single Charmander. I've just played Lily's Determination and found boss's orders for next turn. I'm sitting at 3 prizes and I should probably go down to 1 if, I want to actually win this game. Now, I'm going to admit to maybe the dumbest play that I've ever made. I establish a Grimmsnarl, promote it to the active, and then pass. I completely forgot that Klefki had turned off Shaman's ability and that I was free to KO the keys and finish off that damaged Pidgey. I was so tunnel visioned on bossing up Charmander on the next turn and locking them out of attackers that I didn't want to give them the free pivot and access to Fez. About 10 seconds after passing, I look at them and confess that yes, I am in fact stupid. They punish my awful line by benching a second Charmander and evolving the other into Charmeleon. Now I'm not realistically able to run them out of attackers, but they do have to pass back, keeping Klefki in the active, and I'm able to fix my mistake and actually attack, going down to 1 prize and holding that boss's orders in hand. They whiff the Iono and I'm able to close out a game that I absolutely deserve to lose. So for this next one, I am determined to use at least 3 brain cells. They open a Tatsugiri, bench Shaman, Duskull, 2 Charmanders, and a Pidgey, completely locking themselves out of access to Klefki. So in response, I slam down Psyduck and immediately go for a Yveltal clutch play. By clutching their active Tatsugiri, I successfully bait out Jet Energy. They fall even deeper into the trap by evolving a Dusknoir with rare candy. I just gust up that 3 retreat ghost and refuse to take a KO, never opening up a bench face for Klefki. My opponent burns their second and final Jet Energy to move it out of the active, but with 1 more boss's orders, the game is functionally over. Dusknoir's not able to attack or blow itself up because of my Psyduck, and if they retreat it, that's all of their energy gone, and I'll just bring it right back up. I'm able to eventually build up damage on my side of the board with Petron while moving it over thanks to Monkidori. I don't actually have time to take all 6 prizes, but regardless, they were never winning from this position. Fellas, don't bench lock yourself. Now it's time for the final round, and while neither of us are able to make top cut, there is still at least $1,000 on the line. Nothing to sneeze at. It's another Gardevoir, my 5th and final one for the tournament, but surely this will be the toughest one yet. Can I really keep my undefeated streak in this matchup? Well, it's going to be difficult when they rip a turn 2 rare candy Gardevoir, Adrenabrain for 20, and Roaring Scream for 80 on my only Morgrim. There's at least one upside to this awful situation. My opponent only had access to 2 Psychic Energy, and now they're all stuck on Screamtail. Unless they can discard another, they won't be able to generate Monkidori damage and will be capped at Roaring Scream for 80. Discarding another Psychic Energy isn't a big ask, but it's a small strand of hope for me to hold on to. I evolve up my replacement Morgrim and pray. While they do whiff on the extra Psychic Energy, they are still able to achieve knockout on my Morgrim by burning Professor Turo's Scenario to pick up Screamtail, then placing the damage to retreat back into it, reaching that key 100. But now with Professor Turo's Scenario out of the picture, I will almost always have access to some kind of retreat locking line and can never truly be out of this game. Despite being down 2 prizes, finally getting a rare candied Grimmsnarl online the following turn really boosts my odds of clawing back into this game. However, I'm not able to set up any more Grimmsnarls or any other attackers for that matter. So once they finally take it down, prizes are tied at 2-2. They've got Pheasantipity in play, and I've just found a raw secret box. If I just had a single Dark Energy, Nest Ball, or raw Ursaluna EX in hand, I'd be able to win by using the Big Bear and Boss's orders. But I've got another alternative route that's almost as guaranteed. Remember how that Professor Turo's Scenario got binned at the start of the game? Well, conveniently, I've already got an energy on my Yveltal. All I need to do is secret box for Boss, stick Pheasantipity, and I should be able to buy enough turns to find Ursaluna and win the game. I play secret box, grab my cards, and announce Boss's boss's orders. I don't know if I just sequenced it out too fast, was completely cooked from all the travel and playing 2 full intense days of Pokemon, or some other worldly force just didn't want my wallet getting too thick. But I look down and the supporter that I've got in hand is Arven. Whether or not it's what you would have done, despite me verbally saying boss's orders, the obvious intention, and not having shuffled my deck yet, the actions count for more than any of that, and my opponent is absolutely allowed to deny me from taking it back. Pretty clearly understanding the lose condition, they capitalize on my mistake and steal game 1. Luckily, the set's not over yet. I've made these comebacks before and I can 100% do it again, especially in a matchup like this. I'm playing as fast as I can, well aware that a tie won't be enough and that I need to win these back to back. And game 2 is looking incredible. I've taken 4 prizes and he's only taken 1, but it's also taken a while. With just 40 seconds left on the clock, they pass to me. And knowing I don't even have time to search and shuffle my deck, I just attach a second Dark Energy onto Petulant, creating basically what is completely a checkmated board, and then attack going down to my final prize. They discard all of the energy and their Scream Tail, think about what to promote, draw for turn. That's time in the round. I only made a single action, but since the rules state your turn isn't actually over until your opponent draws for turn, I'm stuck as turn 0, meaning I won't have a chance to finish the game and have to take a loss after getting 1-0'd. I don't even think I reasonably could have scooped game 1 to save time since I pretty much had it locked up. It feels absolutely terrible to go out like this, but the slip is signed and nothing can be changed other than maybe how the time rules work one day. I suppose there is some consolation that this saved us from the awkward discussion of trying to determine a winner when we can't even start game 3, since a tie would result in neither of us getting any cash. I think I made at least one reasonably large mistake in every single one of my day 2 sets, and honestly probably almost every set throughout the entire tournament. I'm far from perfect, and it's just evidence that despite already having some really solid results, there is always going to be room to improve, and I just need to properly lock in. With all that said and done, I ended up with a final record of 9 wins, 3 losses, and 2 ties, placing 91st at the largest regional championships ever held. And doing it all with a deck that no one else has played before, that's something I can be proud of. Plus, maybe all my Grimmsnarl without Frostlass propaganda is starting to stick, because at the most recent regional championships in Stuttgart, despite it being a new format with Phantasmal Flames, the highest placing Grimmy was on my exact Vega 60, so maybe it does hold up. Like I said before, I'll be posting some bonus content talking about the deck for my YouTube channel members, Patreon supporters, and over on my Metafy. So if that's something you'd be keen on, definitely go and check it out. Alright, shout out to everyone who made it through the entire video. I know this was a long one. The best thing you can do now is like, comment, subscribe, and check out some more classic TimDanklin content. Cheers, fellas.